concerned citizens, welcome to the first ever Maury River Alliance, or MRA, Public Forum. It is my pleasure to serve today as the MC for today's event. Our purpose is to give you an overview of MRA's mission and to provide information about the water quality in the Maury River, as well as the safety of the Goshen Dam. We hope everyone here tonight will leave with a better understanding of these issues and their impact on the river, on the Rockbridge community, and on local residents and visitors who come here to enjoy our natural resources. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. A special thank you to several notable guests that include local elected officials, representatives of elected officials, and government agencies. Thank you to the Department of Wildlife Resources, Department of Environmental Quality, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation for your attendance this evening. Thank you for making the Maury River Alliance Public Forum a priority. Thank you so much for your interest. Please silence all cellular devices at this time. The restrooms are located down the short hallway just past the kitchen. Feel free to excuse yourself at any time to utilize the facilities. This session is being recorded and photographed. Please hold all questions to the end. There will be an opportunity to ask questions, and we request that you record your question on a 3x5 card that was provided. If you didn't receive a card, please raise your hand and someone will get you one. Please place your card in one of the collection baskets, and MRA volunteers will be through later, of course, in the forum to collect those in the collection baskets. Also, help yourself to the refreshments. If you've not done so already, just save me a donut from Puritas. Thanks. At this time, I'd like to introduce Sandra Stewart. Sandra serves as a co-chair of the Rockbridge Conservation's Watershed Committee, as well as the project lead for the Maury River Alliance. Sandra does hands-on fieldwork and has followed water-related problems in Rockbridge waterways for many years. Sandra will share more with us about the Maury River Alliance. Sandra, the floor is yours.
This is really a pleasure to see so many. Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. My voice doesn't carry either. But thank you. This is a wonderful surprise. I know there are a number of people who have been concerned with the sediment releases from Lake Meriwether for many, many years. I'm sure you know Jay Gillum comes immediately to mind. And there's several others I've seen that have been also involved for many, many years. So thank you for staying with this problem. So, why does this problem continue to happen? And what brings us together this particular evening? The obvious answer: bright green algae and sediment being released from Lake Meriwether for most of August 2023. The smell and sludge in the river took over and could not be ignored. More and more people complained. Okay, is that better? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll start with my question then. Why does this problem continue to happen? And what brings us together this particular evening? The obvious answer: bright green algae and sediment being released from Lake Meriwether for most of August 2023. The smell and sludge in the river took over and could not be ignored. More and more people complained to Rockbridge Conservation, and after August, pictures began to be posted online of the continuing appearance of sediment from the little calf pasture into the Maury. The concerns came not only from Maury River landowners, but also from boaters, fishermen, swimmers, tourists, and residents who see our scenic river as a natural gift for the well-being of the whole community. In response to these concerns, a small group of residents decided to call a meeting, and around 50 people showed up. A steering committee was formed as an initiative of Rockbridge Conservation and began to look into the sediment problem, its history, the regulations that are in place, what is needed to prevent further degradation, and how to restore the river to a healthy state. Employees at the Department of Wildlife Resources, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Army Corps of Engineers, and in addition, many elected officials were contacted, and they've been very helpful. After the county administrator arranged an in-person meeting for the steering committee with a representative of the Scouts, there have been 3 Zoom meetings. We hope these conversations will continue in a collaborative manner that recognizes the importance of restoring and protecting our river. As you see on the program, I'm sorry, I hope most of you got the program. We didn't anticipate this many, but borrow from a neighbor if you can to see what's going on. We will be reporting what we have found out in the last 6 months and some ideas of what can be done in the coming months. So let's get started. Jenny?
Thank you, Sandra, for the overview, and thank you for all that you do in the interest of water quality. At this time, we will see a 12-minute video presentation about Lake Meriwether, the Goshen Dam, and the relationship to pollution and safety concerns. Ann McClung, a Rockbridge County resident, produced the video, drawing on her years of experience studying dam safety, especially the safety of the Goshen Dam. Ann is also an MRA volunteer. Please roll Ann's video.
And you really live by the river? What a jolly life. By it and with it and on it and in it, said the rat. It's brother and sister to me, and aunts and company, and food and drink, and naturally washing. It's my world and I don't want any other. What it hasn't got is not worth having, and what it doesn't know is not worth knowing. Lord, the times we've had together. Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Graham. The beauty and tranquility of Lake Meriwether pictured is undeniable, but the multitude of problems the lake has created and could possibly create cannot be denied. The problems include flooding, inadequate adherence to laws and regulations, and damage to the water quality downstream. What follows is a brief history and chronology of the incidents and efforts made to ensure the health of the Maury below the dam and the safety of the dam. The Goshen Dam was constructed in 1966 by flooding hundreds of acres, about 425 acres of once fertile farmland and farmhouses. It is located about a mile above Goshen Pass and was built by the Boy Scouts of America for recreational purposes for the National Capital Area Council, part of the BSA, to hold summer recreational events for scouts from the DC and Maryland area. The NCAC is considered the wealthiest and largest of the councils of the BSA. The dam is 38 feet tall and is earthen on either side of a 148-foot-long concrete channel. In this channel are 10 motorized weir slide gates. Each is 14 feet wide and 11 feet high, and each controls flow through a 13-foot wide opening. During much of its 56 years of existence, the dam has been classified as a high-hazard dam. This classification is not based on the current condition of the structure. Instead, it is a high-hazard dam because of the damage to property and loss of life to those downstream were there to be a breach in the dam. Despite the potential for catastrophic loss of life and property damage, the condition of the dam will determine the likelihood of such a breach. But the safety of the dam has been fraught with problems of conflicting conflicting requirements of government agencies and the private owner, the BSA, which seemingly left the dam in precarious repair for many years before taking action to fix it, and only after pressure from our county to do so. There are so many government agencies, both local and state, involved in this problem, it is no wonder that little progress can be made. The problems of water quality, sedimentation, and dam safety are long-standing since the creation of the dam and lake. All of the agencies have worked to try and make the dam safe and the rivers clean, though a permanent, comprehensive, and integrated solution still eludes us. Notice the often presence of sediment coming from the lake. Another concern is that the agencies don't always work together. For example, the DEQ wants the end gates of the dam closed at all time to prevent silt from leaching into the river. But the DCR wants all the gates to be operable for flooding concerns. So when one government agency says to do one thing and the other says no, what is to be done? And how does that appease the folks downstream who have concerns of a dam breach and the health of the water? And where does the onus lie? Some of the local agencies involved, along with the government agencies, are the Rockbridge Board of Supervisors, Board of Zoning Appeals, Maury Service Authority, Fire and Rescue Commission, Natural Bridge Soil and Water, and Rockbridge Conservation. Rockbridge Conservation has doggedly worked over the years to see that the dam is safe and that the health of the water is protected. Throughout their chronology of events and issues, there are many references to the non-compliance to the Dam Safety Act shown by the BSA. A few pertinent points made in their detailed chronology are as follows. In 1985, Election Day flood, Goshen Pass was closed for a year so VDOT could rebuild the road. In April of 1992, dam gates were damaged in a flood. In April of 1993, an unpermitted discharge of sediment resulted in a fish kill. And in September of 2016, the Scouts had to pay $26,000 in fines because of a sewage lagoon discharge. Most recently, the Maury River was made unacceptable for any recreation. The lake was drained throughout August, a time when the river is enjoyed by many folks. The purpose was so that they could do some dredging on the upper part of the lake to make it more conducive for boating and swimming activities for the Scouts. The dredging could not happen because the BSA's bankruptcy issues kept them from receiving grant funds. At this time, however, they will be eligible for the funds for the dredging if they can get the permit to do so. This means that they will drain the lake once again and allow untold amounts of sediment into the river below. This will, again, threaten the health of the river. The Maury River Alliance was formed because of this event. It is made up of citizens who are very concerned and unhappy with the management of the lake and dam. This group is working in conjunction with Rockbridge Conservation to educate the public and search for more permanent solutions to the ongoing problems of dam safety and the health of the Maury River below the dam. The designation of the dam as being a high hazard dam requires the BSA to have an emergency action plan and an inundation study were the dam to breach. This study, which covers an emergency plan as well as what is predicted to happen downstream in case of a breach, can be found on the Rockbridge Regional Library System website, rrlib.net. Then click on Lake Meriwether Files. The EAP and inundation study also reveals what causes an emergency and who is to be notified. Right now, the only way citizens will be alerted to a possible disaster is through the emergency alert system that sends out texts, emails, and phone calls. The study lists some 970 property owners from the dam to Glasgow who would be affected by a dam breach. It shows what a property owner can expect in the way of high water, how long it will take to get there, and how long it will stay there in 4 different scenarios. There is a sunny day breach, a PMF breach, which is a full breach and the dam is no longer holding any water, the worst case scenario. There's a 0.045 PMF, the erodible plug in the emergency spillway is gone. And finally, a 0.045 no breach, the emergency spillway has overtopped, but the plug has not eroded. The names of the property owners are given along with their addresses and phone numbers. The distance of your property from the dam and the elevation of your structure are also shown. For each scenario, the report gives the water surface elevation, the initial flow time, and the maximum depth of what may occur. There are maps of all the properties listed which delineate with markers showing flood levels at the different scenarios. Seen here is an example of a map of a lone mill, and this one of Rockbridge Baths. These next animated maps show the inundation in downtown Rockbridge Baths were the dam to fail. The first shows flooding due to a sunny day breach. The second shows predicted flooding in a 0.45 PMF converged. And this map shows a PMF converged, which is the worst case scenario. The BSA faces legal and financial issues and a significantly lowered membership. All of this, plus climate change, creates an unknown future for the dam at Lake Meriwether and all those downstream. All of us need to be concerned and vigilant. Inspections must be done every 2 years as required. A viable management plan must be developed and adhered to by the BSA. The EAP inundation study must be kept up to date. Government agencies, particularly the DCR and the DEQ, local agencies such as RAC and the Emergency Service and the BSA must work together for the best possible safety of the dam and of lives and properties below the dam, as well as for the benthos of the Maury River. And finally, a more satisfactory alert system needs to be implemented to warn river property owners of a possible breach. Getting a text alert message in the middle of the night isn't enough. It is possible to have sirens or horns placed strategically to warn of flooding. Let's all work together for the safety and health of the beloved Maury River, which provides enjoyment by so many and in so many different ways.
Thank you, Ann, for sharing your video with us. I understand you have a few remarks to add. Over to you, Ann.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the probability of the dam failing is low. But if it does fail, the probability of the damage it could do is very high. And remember, even if there is no breach, no overtopping, no eroded drain plug, if conditions are right, as they were in 1985, there would be considerable damage downstream. I can speak personally to that. That flood caused more than $100,000 worth of damage to my property. I lost a huge shop full of farming tools and other outbuildings. My tractor was rendered useless. Acres of property were left with 10-foot holes carved out, taking away all the topsoil, fencing, all gone. My hot water heater, furnace, electrical system all had to be repaired or replaced. Buildings all along the Maury suffered damage like this, and even worse. Many folks were without power for 2 weeks or more. No phones either. The road through Goshen Pass had to be rebuilt. Bridges had to be rebuilt. Damage in Rockbridge County was estimated at $100 million. We had no warning, and as luck would have it, it was in the middle of the night. So again, we all need to work together to make us folks downstream feel safe from both flooding waters and water quality. We need to adhere to the BSA motto and be prepared.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Justin Deal. Justin is the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR, Dam Safety Engineer for our region. Justin will share about the Dam Safety Inventory System and the current status of the Goshen Dam. The floor is yours, Justin.
Thank you all for having me. First, I want to ask, though, can I come back for the trout dinner that's planned? I saw that it's being advertised. Will do, okay.
Mike, up here.
I thought,
Mike,
okay.
thank you.
Just- A little better? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So I can come back to the trout dinner. I thought about asking after, but there's a different answer. Anne actually took a little bit of my thunder. She hit on several of the points that I'd like to touch on, but maybe a little bit different perspective and a few clarifications on some things. But yeah, so I'm Justin. I'm the Regional Dam Safety Engineer for this region, if that's been covered. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, I forgot to.
Mike.
Can I just hold it?
You can.
Okay.
Yep.
How's this side? So what I want to touch on is a very brief overview of the regulatory requirements, and then where Goshen Dam currently sits in regard to those requirements. And then lastly, we'll talk about our Dam Safety Inventory System, which we shorten for DSIS. We house all the information on this dam, any other dams, if you have other dams that you want to look into, you can do that. Go ahead, George. So regulations overview, the purpose is to provide for proper, safe design, construction, operation, and maintenance of state regulated dams. This is accomplished through the Dam Safety Act that was mentioned by Ann, and the Virginia Impounding Structure Regulations. And note that these items regulate the safety and integrity of dams and any structures that are associated with them. They don't regulate sedimentation or pollutants. Okay, it's just about the safety and integrity of the dam embankment. That's good. If you were to boil down the regulations, there are 4 main points, and it's these here. The dam break inundation zone study, which we again shorten for DBIZ, which include inundation maps and the hazard potential classification. So that's an important qualifier, I think. We've heard hazard, high hazard. It's high hazard potential. Okay, like the dam today isn't a high hazard, but it does have that potential to be. Ann mentioned emergency action plans. I'll talk about that a little more. And then dams are required to have an operation and maintenance certificate or plan. And then lastly, annual inspections. So we'll break each of those down and where Goshen Dams currently sits with regard to this. As Ann mentioned, it does have a current DVIZ that concluded as a high hazard potential. And there are multiple breach scenarios. By the way, the PMF stands for probable maximum flood. So that's the theoretical maximum flood that this area could see. It's very high, highly unlikely, but that's what Most of the maps you see out there are representative of that, by the way. So what is hazard potential? Next slide, please. So we define it as high as right here. Dams that upon failure would cause probable loss of life or serious economic damage. That's where this one is. Okay? I think Dan's covered most of that. Next slide. Inundation maps. So look at this. To the left of the screen is north. As you can see, it's a very long inundation map. It's over 32 miles. Takes up 26 map sheets. But due to the terrain, it's very narrow. Which partly, it doesn't really have anywhere to go except for down the valley, so to speak. That's why it is so long. And these maps are available. Ann gave a source. They're also available through DESIS, as we're going to discuss later, how anyone in here or any of your relatives or any other community members can get access to and pull those up. Next, please. Emergency action plans are kept on file with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, as well as local emergency managers. It's the owner's responsibility to develop those, and they're submitted every 6 years. Unless there are changes downstream or ownership, personnel changes, they have to be updated immediately, or they're supposed to be. That's part of the annual drill that the owner is supposed to conduct to make sure nothing's changed downstream, contacts haven't changed, that kind of thing. And as Ann mentioned, that they do have a current EAP that was approved in 2020. It will be set to expire in 26. That's of course unless any updates need to occur in the meantime. And you can do that through DESIS as well. Okay. Operation and maintenance certificates. So there are two types, a regular and a conditional. The regular certificate runs for 6 years, and that is given to dams who have no outstanding structural or hydraulic or regulatory deficiencies. The other type is a conditional. It's either 1 or 2 years, and the conditions or the deficiencies are listed with a suggested timeline that they complete those within that time frame so that they could be eligible for a regular certificate upon the expiration of their conditional certificate. Goshen Dam currently has a conditional 2-year certificate. The primary conditions, as noted when it was issued in 2022, were to, 1, provide a professional engineer inspection. That's since been completed this past January. A P&P worksheet, which has been completed, and the low-level drainage plan, which has not been completed as of yet. As many of you are aware, that drain became stuck due to inactivity. There was a moratorium, if you will, on opening it for a number of years. And so sediment filtered in and allowed or made it inoperable. That's a requirement, though, for high hazard dams, that they be able to lower it ahead of a significant storm event or during. Lastly, of their primary conditions are emergency plan tabletop exercise. They have not yet done that. Their certificate does expire this coming July. And they're due for reapplication now, which is about 90 days ahead of their current expiration. Let's see. And their eligibility for regular versus conditional is going to depend on if they get the drain fixed between now and July and do their tabletop exercise. Engineer inspections have a condition assessment. And what I want to point to here is the fair assessment, because that's what the most recent couple of inspections have been. Maybe everyone can't read that, but it's no dam safety deficiencies exist that are recognized for normal loading conditions. However, rare or extreme hydraulic or seismic event may result in dam safety deficiency. Okay. This is, grab some water, excuse me. Get a little dry here. So this is a snippet from their current inspection. These are the comments made by their engineer. As you can see it for the recommendations, continue with repair to repair the bottom drain. So what I'm getting at here is this is the only reason for their fair assessment. Otherwise, it would be a satisfactory rated dam. So once that is fixed, I think that's in the books for soon, they would be, unless barring anything else, they would be a satisfactory dam. Okay. So I've been mentioning this dam safety inventory system, and anybody can get access to that. It's a long link here. If anybody wants to write that down and has interest, you can. But you can also just go to dcr.virginia.gov and search for DSIS. Okay, it's probably an easier approach. And there's a form you fill out there. You're going to need an inventory number for this dam, so you get access to all the files for this dam, and that's 163001. I think that's it. Last slide. Again, I'm Justin Deal. I think questions will be at the end. There's my contact info. I also have some cards on the table in the back if anybody would like to give me a call or email.
Thank you, Justin, for your presentation. Also, if you have not already and desire to do so, please consider writing down a question on the question card you are provided. And please hold all cards for now, as the MRA volunteers will be through later in the presentation to collect the cards. But please write down your questions if you have any on those cards. At this time, I'd like to introduce Joan Joyce. Joan is a member of the Maury River Alliance and a recreational user of the river as well. Joan will share more about Lake Meriwether's drawdown, exposure of mudflats and sediment concerns, as well as the impacts to the beneficial uses of the Maury River. The floor is yours, Joan.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Joan, and I've been using the Maury River since 1984, so it's been 40 years. I came here to Rockbridge County to swim in Goshen Pass. I was invited by a friend, and I fell in love with Goshen Pass. I hiked there, swim there, and along the Maury River there are other great spots, and have enjoyed watching people fish and kayak and do a lot of things. So I won't have to talk to you for very long. I prepared an amateur iMovie, which I've never done before. So what I want to do is just share with you, though. First, I wanted to say thank you to Jay Gillum, who has spent years protecting our waters and tributaries. And I just am so grateful for the work of so many people before us now that have established a lot of documentations and facts that have been amazing. And so this problem with our river is not new. I found out about it this summer, so it's kind of embarrassing to be here 40 years and not know there's been these major releases and long extended over the runoff all through the winter. So when I was out there this summer and I asked some friends and we went to go swimming, it was after the August 4 release, and I saw that the water was gross in town. For a better word, is gross is the only thing I can think of when I look at and saw what was happening. I went swimming out there with some friends, and usually when I swim, I go against the current. I love Indian Pool, my favorite. And I swam for probably 45 minutes or longer, and then went again. It didn't seem quite as bad out where the river flows more, but it was still green and there was a fishy smell, and the water was up, which was weird because we were in somewhat of a drought. And it was warmer than I expected. So for me, that was all kind of different. But I swam, and for the first time after 40 years, I was sick for 2 days. I felt sick, and it was just a sort of a shock that I'd taken for granted, the Maury River. And I mean, I love it. I get so much out of everything about being in nature. And so thus began this journey of 8 months to find out why, what would happen, and I go out every couple weeks to document, take pictures, take videos, and other people do too, at the confluence. So if you live in town or you live in Buena Vista or further downriver, you just see a green river and sometimes mucky green. But at the confluence you see, and I'll show you in the video, and on the poster boards in the back, you see the division in the color, the yellowish water that comes out, and sometimes it goes to 3 or 4 miles downriver, and then it sort of turns into sort of what it is now. I was here, and my husband's a native, so we know what happened in the flood of '85, and that was awful. But I really I just hope that we can all really care about our river, whether all the recreational uses. So I made this video. I hope, it's not perfect, but I hope it sort of inspires you to get involved with supporting the river and keeping it clean. I'm not good at reading from my notes. I wrote them forever, and I'm not a reader from my notes. So I don't think I really missed anything, except for also my daughters, both who are grown, and we have 4 grandchildren now, have all been swimming. The youngest one hasn't gone to the river yet. He's 1. But they've all been swimming out at the river their whole life. I mean, that's what we do, and they kayak, and they've all been on swim teams. So I appreciate you all being here tonight and hearing from us. Thank you.
Our beautiful including the Appalachian jewelweed. The Maury River is home to beavers, birds, and other wildlife. This river is a special and timeless place for so many people. Tubing, floating, kayaking, canoeing, and fishing are all some of the reasons we love our river. I forgot how much fun skipping rocks can be. Thank you, Ken, for encouraging me to press on for our river. Ben Salem Wayside is a popular place to picnic, swim, and fish, which also includes a historic lock. Nature provides a place to reflect, pray, learn, and be refreshed. Thousands walk, bike, fish, photograph, and paint along the Chessie Trail, which runs beside the Maury River for approximately 7 miles from Lexington to Buena Vista. Glen Maury Park is a popular camping and recreational area. Then this summer, August 4th, 2023, a decision was made by the Director of Facilities for the Goshen Scout Reservation to release their lake water, which had an adverse impact on the Maury River. This summer's lake draining into our river was a wake-up call to all of us. We have learned that these destructive releases have been happening for many years during the fall or winter months. Lowering and raising of Lake Meriwether's level has been a regular practice, which creates runoff of sediment from exposed mudflats. This sediment loads up our riverbeds with slippery sludge over the years. It's like a slow-growing cancer that doesn't go away without treatment. Our river is a necessary resource. Here you see on February 24th, 2024, Lake Meriwether and the Goshen Dam, which is approximately 1 mile above Goshen Pass. The water flowing from the dam is Little Calf Pasture River, which has been impaired since 1996. This river merges with the Calf Pasture River, becoming the headwaters of the Maury River. Here you see the distinction of these 2 rivers, yet they are one here. Our hope is that Little Calf Pasture River will be restored and we will no longer see this distinction.
According to fishermen and kayakers, this has been happening for at least 25 years. Suspended sediment decreases the penetration of light into the water. This affects fish feeding and schooling practices and can lead to reduced survival. The Chesapeake Trail parking lot is a Green River in Virginia normal 20 miles below the Goshen Dam. April 6, 2024, the Maury River is Lexington City's and the surrounding areas' drinking water. Where does all this sediment come from? This is a view looking upstream from the dam after the lake was drained. This exposed sediment washes down the river when it rains. Lake lowering causes exposed sediment to run off into our rivers all winter. Here is a part of the lake bed after draining, revealing Little Calf Pasture River running towards the dam, September 7th, 2023. These exposed mudflats allow tons of sediment to run off into our river throughout the winter. Lake Meriwether is on a flat terrain where sediment accumulates. September 2023. Our river should look a lot like Calf Pasture River. We love our river. Let's keep it clean. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Joan, for your presentation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stan Ponce, Civil and Environmental Engineer and Watershed Management Specialist. Dr. Ponce will provide an overview of the legal and regulatory authorities to address sediment releases, the Clean Water Act, the point versus non-point water pollution, and finally, the identification and reporting of impaired waters. Over to you.
Thank you, Jenny. So my assignment is to provide an overview of the legal and regulatory authorities to address water quality degradation. So I'm going to give you a very quick snapshot of what's involved, and as she noted earlier, I'm going to give an overview of the regulatory framework, talk about point versus non-point pollution and how those are addressed, the identification and reporting of impaired rivers in Virginia, and the development and use of what's called the total maximum daily load for a specific constituent. The Clean Water Act is the primary federal law in the United States governing water pollution. Its objective is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. It was enacted in 1972. It's administered by the EPA in cooperation with the states. There's a partnership between the states and the federal government in this regard. The real driver behind the establishment of the Clean Water Act was the desire to control discharges from industrial institutions into waters. About the time that this was enacted, the Cuyahoga River outside of Cincinnati caught fire several times. And so that got people's attention, and that led to the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act makes it unlawful to discharge any pollutant from a point source into a navigable water without obtaining a permit. Point sources are those that you can treat at a point. Pretty specific there, right? So it's typically an outfall, like from a sewage plant or an industrial. It's right where you can deal with it at a point, all right? Now, prior to 1987 amendments, the Clean Water Act primarily directed at point source pollution. In contrast, except for general planning activities, little attention had been given to non-point source pollution, that occurring from storm runoff or snow melt across agricultural lands, forests, construction sites, and urban areas, despite the estimates that it represents more than 50% of the nation's remaining water quality problems. In our area, it is the predominant source of pollutants. Examples of non-point source pollution that you're probably aware of is like runoff from a golf course, for example, or a logging operation. How do you deal with that? You deal with these through what's called best management practices. And for example, on a logging operation, a best management practice might be a buffer strip along the river to protect the river from sediment, be a sediment barrier, provide control for temperature, keep finely divided logging debris from entering the stream, which puts a biochemical oxygen demand on the oxygen supply, placement of roads, particularly culverts, and yarding practices. All of those are best management practices that help reduce, for example, sediment into a stream system. Now, under Section 303B of the Clean Water Act, states are mandated to identify waters that do not or are not expected to meet applicable water quality standards using current pollution control technologies. These are identified as impaired waters. It is done by the states, and they develop what's called an impaired waters list, and it's updated every 2 years. For each water body or segment in this category, states are required to set a total maximum daily load of pollutants at a level that ensures applicable water quality standards can be attained and maintained. Okay. All right, next slide. A TMDL, as we refer to it, consists of a permitted waste load allocation, a non-point source load, and a margin of safety. It's a very simple equation, but a lot of work goes into determining how much each of these is, all right? We're going to talk more about that and how it relates back to the little calf pasture. A TMDL is essentially a pollution budget, a quantitative estimate of what it takes to achieve state water quality goals, setting the maximum amount of pollution a water body can receive without violating water quality standards, including the margin of safety. As such, TMDLs provide a scientific calculation of how much of a pollutant loads need to be reduced to meet those standards. A TMDL is both a planning process for attaining water quality standards and a quantitative assessment of problems. The goal of the TMDL is to eliminate an impairment, not meet a pollutant limit just for its own sake. For waters impaired by point source discharges, the TMDLs are enforced through the revisions to the existing Clean Water Act permits. All right. And for waters impaired by non-point source runoff, because there is no federal controls over these sources, there is no permit for these per se. The primary implementation tools are state-run non-point source management programs coupled with state and local and federal land management programs, authorities, and financial assistance. That's where the BMPs come into play. States can, but are not required to regulate non-point sources to achieve the goals set out in the TMDL. It's a very important point, okay? It's pretty much a voluntary activity. Now think of a TMDL as a target. For example, if you were shooting a bow and arrow, the TMDL determines the size of the target for a given watershed. And initially, the outer rings exceed the defined TMDL, and then we need to seek to make it fit through the use of BMPs. Again, the states have no enforcement authority under the Clean Water Act for these BMPs. In Virginia, the development of a total maximum daily load for a stream involves several key steps. First is the selection of pollutants. What are you dealing with? A specific pollutant. It might be dissolved oxygen, it could be temperature, it could be sediment, for example. Then simulate the capacity estimation, how much is okay. Then the pollutant loading assessment, where is it coming from and how much are you getting? Then you go through a process to determine the needed reduction analysis. In Virginia, we have a process to develop what's called an implementation plan to look at what the problems are within a watershed and what it takes then to get to a TMDL. And we're going to talk a little bit more here in a moment about the activities that have been taking place on the Little Calf Pasture. Section 319 of the Clean Water Act provides money to the states and other entities that are involved to address the TMDL. The Little Calf Pasture River, for example, in 1996, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality assessed the water quality of this river, and a section of the river below Goshen Dam failed to meet the general standard for aquatic life. This means that the river does not support a healthy and diverse community of bugs and fish. This is called a benthic impairment, and it's something good to look at because these critters are there all the time. They're filtering the water all the time, and if they are not meeting the standards, that's the impairment in this case. In 2010, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality supported the development of the TMDL to address the benthic impairment in the Little Calf Pasture River. This study was done under the direction of Dr. Robert Brent from JMU, and he did an outstanding job, in my opinion, of developing the TMDL. Then in 2018, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality developed a water quality implementation plan for the Little Calf Pasture River in cooperation with a number of local stakeholders in Virginia Tech. And so that's a summary, really, of the overview of the authorities and the process that's used to address the type of water pollution that you've been looking at in the river. So next up is a colleague here from the Department of Environmental Quality that's going to get more into the nuts and bolts of the TMDL for the Little Calf Pasture.
Thank you, Dr. Ponce. At this time, I'd like to introduce Nesha McCrae. Nesha is the Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL, coordinator for the Valley Regional Office for the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ. Nesha will review the development and implementation planning for Little Calf Pasture River, TMDL, and the status of the implementation plan. The floor is yours, Nesha.
How's that sound?
Good.
Okay. So I'm here tonight to talk with you all about kind of the overall process that the Department of Environmental Quality has been involved in to improve water quality in the Little Calf Pasture River. And I'll say I've been involved with this. I think I was pregnant with my now 7-year-old son when I first started working on this project. So it has been a long time going, but it's been an interesting journey. So I wanted to start with just showing you all a map of the Little Calf Pasture River watershed. So all of the land area that is draining to the Little Calf Pasture River, and point out just a couple of things. 99.1% of this watershed drains to Lake Meriwether. And the remaining 0.9% of the total area within the watershed is just, so here's Lake Meriwether, that's the outlet, and this is the portion that actually drains directly to that impaired segment that Stan talked about that extends 0.83 miles from the dam to the river's confluence with the Calf Pasture River and then onto the Maury. So that little red line represents that biological or benthic impairment, and you can see it is a very large watershed. Next slide. So where is the sediment coming from? So below the lake on that little 0.83 mile segment, that 0.9% of the watershed, the sediment's coming from Lake Meriwether, right? But where is the sediment from the 99% of the watershed? So this pie chart shows you from the TNDL study that we completed where the sediment is coming from. I feel like maybe we missed a slide. Did we miss a slide? There it is. Okay. I don't need to do a lot on this slide because Stan covered most of it. But we did work on this water quality study, this TNDL, between 2008 and 2009. And in that process, we identified sediment as the primary stressor to aquatic life in that little red line, that segment of the Little Calf Pasture River below the dam. And so we created, I think Stan described quite well, an inventory of all of the sources of sediment in that whole watershed. So we look at the watershed as a whole, not just below the lake or not just the lake itself. And we looked at the reductions that we would need to make from each of those sources in order to restore the river. So how much sediment can the Little Calf Pasture take on and still be healthy, right? And so that was the goal, is to determine the reductions that we needed from those sources and kind of divide up, if you can imagine a pie of sediment, divide that up between those sources to accomplish that goal. Okay, now we can go. Or wait, now
where do you want to go?
Where's the sediment coming from? Okay, sorry, somehow something got out of order there. I apologize.
The slides are reversed.
I think so. So, as part of the study, we did look at those sources. And there's a few things I wanted to point out in this pie chart. This degraded riparian pasture land use, you can see it represents over 50% of the sediment that is coming into Lake Meriwether. However, this land use itself represents about 2% of the watershed. And so that degraded riparian pasture land use, it's about 100 meters on either side of the river where livestock have access to the stream, where pastures are overgrazed, they're denuded, the soils are exposed, the banks are undercut. So that's a large portion of the sediment that's coming into Little Calf Pasture River. And you can see the other land uses as well. All right, now we'll roll through that one. Okay, so I know folks are really interested though in Lake Meriwether and its role in this impairment that we're seeing in the Little Calf Pasture River. And that was also a very large part of what we looked at in this TNDL study. So what did we find? A few interesting things. First of all, about 94% of the sediment that is in Lake Meriwether is coming from that 99% drainage area, right? Because that's a very large area. The remaining 6% is coming from the land that's draining directly to Lake Meriwether and that exposed shoreline that is eroding into the lake. We found that when the lake is lowered and those mudflats that were in Jen's video, when those mudflats are exposed, we see increased erosion of sediment into the lake. And then we see extended periods of turbidity downstream of the lake. We looked at how much of the lake bed is exposed when the lake is lowered at various depths. So it's at full pool at 26 feet. So if we lower it, or if the scouts lower it 4 feet, about 143 acres of lake bed of those mudflats are then exposed. If they lower it 8 feet, about half of the bottom of the lake is exposed, so around 260, 270 acres that is then available for that erosion and that wash off into the lake. Interestingly enough, we found on average about 3/4 of the sediment that comes into the lake during a storm event is released downstream. So that means that the lake is effectively trapping about 1/4 of the sediment that's coming in from the little calf pasture during a storm, which seems kind of odd, right? Because then you would think that water quality above the lake would be worse than below because the lake is trapping sediment. But what we learned is happening is that yes, the lake does trap some of that sediment, but then it's slowly released downstream. And due to the nature of that sediment, it remains suspended in the water column for a very long period of time, much, much longer than what you see upstream. We found it can be up to 4 times longer downstream that the water remains turbid after a storm than upstream, for up to 8 days. And with aquatic life, you know, they can sustain a day or two of highly turbid water, but 8 days is repeatedly going to be too long to support healthy aquatic life in the river. Okay, next slide. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a few slides, but I also wanted to share some other results of a more recent study that we worked with James Madison University and Robert Brent on. And as part of this study, it was back in 2020, 2022 and 2023, Robert and some of his students did a few different types of monitoring. They monitored turbidity both above and below the lake, and they monitored turbidity when the lake was drawn down in the winter and when it was full in the summer. And so this gave a lot of neat opportunities to compare those data. So one thing that Dr. Brent found in his study is that concentrations downstream of the lake, when it's lowered in the winter, were 25 times higher. Turbidity was 25 times higher below the lake when it's lowered in the winter than upstream, right? So that's significant. We also found that when we compared wintertime versus summertime loads, that they were around 6.5 times higher when the lake is drawn down. So actual export of sediment from the lake is around 6.5 times higher when those mudflats are exposed. Next slide. So going back to that TMDL study that was completed and approved in 2010, I mentioned that we identified reductions that were needed from all of these different sources. And so this is just a very generalized snapshot of what the TMDL study called for. And as a reminder of what Stan spoke to, these are voluntary reductions. These are all non-point sources, so these are not required by the TMDL. This is the recommendation of what's needed to restore the river. So you can see 40% was kind of a baseline for a lot of those land uses in the watershed. We hit that degraded riparian pasture land use, which you can see this is kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like in the watershed. We hit that a little bit harder because I think there's some really great opportunities there that would come at a much lower cost. And then a 34% reduction from Lake Meriwether itself. So in 2017, I was part of this is when I was pregnant with my now 7-year-old. I worked with a large group, including the Boy Scouts, to develop a TMDL implementation plan for the Little Calf Pasture River. And so the goal of that plan is to say, okay, I showed you those reductions in that table. How do we actually get there? The numbers are great, right? But how do you accomplish them? And so I don't have a list here of everything that's in that plan, but these are some of kind of the biggest things that we called for. So almost 20 miles of livestock exclusion fencing would be needed in order to really address that degraded riparian pasture. It's really denuded. Going with that 3,000 acres of improved pasture management where livestock are being rotated through pastures so they don't become overgrazed. 80 acres of streamside buffer plantings where you're planting trees and shrubs alongside the stream. And then we also looked at how to get at that 34% reduction from Lake Meriwether. So that includes reducing the length of time that the lake is drawn down and reducing the depth to which it is drawn down. And we looked at excavating portions of those mudflats that become exposed when the lake is drawn down. and coming up with some way to stabilize them in the winter with vegetation, whether that's seeding them with some sort of grass. There's some opportunities to learn there, but that was part of the plan. Total cost estimates, $4.5 million, $1.6 million in lake management costs, and that price tag is largely tied to the dredging of the mudflats. So the recommended lake drawdown scenario we came up with, we worked closely with the Boy Scouts to come up with a scenario they felt supported what their needs were from that lake and would be effective for them from an operational standpoint. So we had a wet weather target for years when we have a lot of rain and a dry weather target. You can see in wet years a maximum drawdown depth of 7.5 feet for no longer than 3 months, and dry weather target of 5.5 feet for no longer than 4 months. So if this were followed along with some of those other targets that I showed you in terms of agricultural best management practices, our estimates show that we would get to a level of sediment that was tolerable for aquatic life in the Little Calf Pasture River. So now, where are we? So in 2022, Rockbridge County was awarded what we call a 319 grant, stemming from EPA Section 319 of the Clean Water Act. It's just over $200,000, and it includes a number of different partners in that effort. Most of the money is to be awarded to the Boy Scouts for dredging of the lake. Some of that money went to JMU, and actually their portion of this project has been completed, and that included some of the monitoring information that I was showing you from the study. And then Headwaters Soil and Water Conservation District, which is actually up in Augusta County, offered up $130,000 in matching funds. And they're doing a really, really cool project, which hopefully will continue on as planned. I know the Augusta County Correctional Center is closing, but this is to work on their farm to exclude livestock from the stream there, implement rotational grazing, and some other things. So it's a very large project. It's on a tributary, Smith Creek, to the Little Calf Pasture River, and will be very significant in terms of reducing sediment. Next slide. So this is kind of a list of what's in this grant. So a target of 1 acre of dredging of those mudflats, 20 acres of some sort of temporary seeding to establish vegetative cover in the summer, maintaining the lake in accordance with the recommendations that are in the TNDL implementation plan, that drawdown scenario I shared. And then Dr. Brent at JMU installed, this is a snapshot of real-time lake level and turbidity monitoring equipment so that the scouts can ping this database and see what the lake level is and look at turbidity concentrations in the lake. And then the monitoring that they did, and Dr. Brent produced a really excellent report for us. And then the livestock exclusion fencing, that's at the correctional center that Headwaters is doing, 45,000 feet. It's pretty incredible for a single project. So there's lots involved there. We've got some great volunteer monitors who are doing an upstream and downstream biological monitoring of the river to see how it's improving. And we also, with the help of Spencer Suter and VMI, completed cleanup of a sinkhole above Lake Meriwether because the scouts were saying that they were drawing down the lake to clean it out because debris is washing in. So we thought, well, if we can get rid of some of the debris that's washing in, then maybe they won't have to draw it down for as long. So that was also completed. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nesha, for that presentation. At this time, please pass any question cards to the end of the aisles. Looking at this aisle here, if you could all pass them to this aisle because getting through over here will be difficult for our volunteers. So again, if you have any questions, if you can pass it to the aisles, and our volunteers will be through to collect those question cards. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Linda Larson. Linda is a member of the Maury River Alliance and a chiropractor that we may all need to go see after sitting in these chairs so long. So, over to you, Dr. Larson.
evening. I want to thank everyone who is here or watching this on the recording for participating. Given all the information we've heard tonight, I want to... Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try again. Good evening. I want to thank everyone who is here or watching this on the recording for participating. Given all the information we've heard tonight, I want to suggest some next steps. Mainly, what can we do to restore and protect the Maury River? To support regulations, we are already developing working relationships with our elected officials and people working in the departments that oversee the enforcement of the Clean Water Act. By engaging our elected officials, we can help improve the health of the Maury, and we want to encourage you to contact these leaders as well, to let them know that the river is important to you and the safety of the dam is essential to this community. We have some form letters for you to take with you for guidance in sending your own emails or letters to our elected officials. The forms are at the back of the table, in the table at the back of the room. We have a sheet with 5 talking points. These will help you talk with people about the problems with our river. In addition, if you email info@MauryRiverAlliance.org, you will be provided with links to articles about the Clean Water Act, dam safety, and how sedimentation pollution affects the river. There's a sheet on the table with a list of the suggested articles. Please read these articles so you will be able to talk about this situation with officials, your friends, and coworkers to help them understand how sediment in the river is impacting the community. A handout is also on the table with the contact information for the elected leaders for all of our local governments, as well as the state and federal officials in this area, and the officials of the National Capital Area Council, Boy Scouts of America. What else can we do? We need to participate publicly. We need speakers at every city council meeting, town council meeting, or board of supervisors meeting. We need weekly letters to the editor for the News Gazette and monthly letters to the editor for the Advocate. We can request to be included in the annual tabletop exercise where the National Capital Area Council, BSA, predicts the downstream damage caused by a breach of the dam as part of their responsibility within the emergency action plan. By being involved, we can encourage that all residents along the river and within the impacted areas will be notified and warned in case the dam fails. We can also request a better alarm system, possibly sirens along the river to warn of a dam failure or an abnormal amount of water being released from the lake. Maybe contacting state and federal senators, your state delegate, and federal representative on a regular basis. Say contact a different elected official every week for a 5-minute conversation with their aides to see what progress has been made. If you leave a message or email and request communication from them, you will get it. Most importantly, we hope to have a regular dialogue with the National Capital Area Council, BSA, to create a productive relationship that will improve the health and safety of the Maury River. Please join us.
Thank you, Linda. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge we do have some elected officials or representatives of elected officials, and so if you desire, please raise your hand at this time. I think it may be helpful for some of the citizens to see some of our representatives of elected officials or local officials here today. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the Q&A portion, Sandra has a few polling questions she would like to ask this body, and this provides a little time for our Q&A committee to identify the questions that we are going to answer. At this time, MRA panel members, please take your seats at the panel table. And Sandra, over to you for those polling questions.
Yes. Thank you all.
I'm really overwhelmed by the turnout and the interest in this, what I've considered such an important problem for so many years. So thank you all. We want just a brief survey while they're sorting out the questions with just a show of hands. Do you want to stay informed about our activities? Great. Wow. Okay. Now, with the understanding that group emails will be blind copied so that they cannot be co-opted by anybody, is it okay to use your email for information about every 2 months probably? Is that okay? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Do you use Facebook?
No.
Sorry. What about Instagram?
Nope.
Wow, okay. Now we know what the way to go. Would you like to become more engaged with one of the committees? Either water quality, dam safety, or the legislation? Any? Oh, we do have a few. Okay. Do you know who to contact if you want to do this? This would be, if you send an email to info@rockridgeconservation.com. .org, thank you. Okay, that's info@rockridgeconservation.com. Someone else than I will be answering. Okay, thank you all. That will be very helpful. And are we ready for the questions?
Just